It's your Friday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. A little bit of a different show today. Usually you get to or have to listen to me yammer grandstand for several minutes at the start of the show before we get to a guest. Today we've got two guests and so much show that I don't really have time to yammer myself. And frankly, I'm a little out of steam after everything through the week. So I got Ben Goessling joining me here in just a minute to talk Vikings, setting up everything big about that game Sunday against Dallas. Really good stuff from Ben, as always. And then after that, Jon Marthaler, soccer guru, friend of mine, will help me set up the World Cup. World Cup starts this weekend. First U.S. match Monday against Wales, so looking forward to that. Jon does a great job writing about soccer in various places, talking about soccer, so I was excited to have him on to talk about that as well. So, like I said, we're going to get right to it right now. None of me just talking and talking. We're just going to get right to the guests today. Vikings beat writer Ben Goessling joins me now, as he often does on Fridays here on Daily Delivery. Ben, I got to imagine some of what's been going on this week is trying to appreciate, if you're the Vikings, appreciate what happened in Buffalo, but not kind of get caught up in the hangover of it, because they got another game Sunday, and coming after that, it's going to be coming quick Thursday against the Patriots. Two important games. Dallas in particular, another conference game, a team that is good, even though they stubbed their toe a little bit in Green Bay last week, couldn't hold on to that lead. Has there been talk out at the headquarters in Eagan this week about kind of trying to refocus after everything that happened and just kind of the craziness and some of the celebrity that comes with a game like that?
Yeah, there has. I mean, they changed their routine up a little bit. I think as much for physical reasons as mental or emotional ones. They did not do their normal practice on Wednesday. First padded practice of the week was Thursday. Kevin O'Connell said they still got a fairly extensive session in, but a lot of that was just to give them a little bit more time to rest. I think there's also an element to it of, hey, this was an emotionally taxing game. I mean, you had players talk about this was one of the hardest games they've ever played. To make that kind of comeback, it goes to overtime, cold, windy day, physical game against that team. There was a lot that had to be spent to win that game. So trying to get it back to normal is a little bit more of a process. The NFL, players talk all the time about a 24-hour rule. That does not create a statute of limitations on people texting you or tweeting at you about the Justin Jefferson catch or interview requests. I mean, there were plenty of questions to Justin Jefferson about that catch on Thursday. And, so kind of trying to live in the moment while still getting a lot of credit and a lot of celebrity status, as you mentioned, for that is the challenge right now. I mean, this is, I'd said it a little bit yesterday on Access Vikings too, but the stakes are not the same, but the emotional peak and then trying to come back down to a point where you can move on to the next thing reminded me a little bit of the Minneapolis Miracle, just in the sense of it was such an improbable way to win, or at least an improbable way to take the lead and then get it to overtime to eventually win with the fumble recovery in the end zone like they had it, and trying to just get back to, hey, we're kind of at a normal focus level for the next thing, and we're not continuing to live in the past is a difficult thing to do sometimes. I think that's the example I've seen the most in my time covering this team, and it's not the same stakes here, obviously, but there's a little bit of that kind of emotional crescendo that you have to kind of ride out afterwards.
Like you said, not the same stakes. Of course, if they lose this game Sunday, they're not done for the season. But that said, I mean, they are in a position now where even at 8-1, they want to keep the train moving. And, as they think about the big picture stuff, the Eagles lost a few days ago, kind of opened the door a little bit more on, the idea of, playing out this, last 8 games of the season with the number 1 seed more plausible than it felt even a few days ago, and how important that is now when only one team gets a bye. So certainly some importance in this game. And, strange. It was a little strange to me that they opened as underdogs in this game. And, betting lines are what they are. They don't always reflect the true kind of, how good teams are. Sometimes they reflect what people are going to bet on. But
Yes.
at the same time, Dallas is a very good team, and this is not that is a reflection of the task at hand.
Yeah, and I think ESPN Stats and Information said this. Kevin Seifert put this out there on Thursday that this is the first time since 1976 that a team that's 8-1 or better is an underdog at home in a game where its starting quarterback, its normal quarterback, is expected to play.
Wow.
So this is not common for a team of the Vikings stature to be an underdog at home. And I think it tells you probably a little bit about the Cowboys, and maybe a little bit of still remaining skepticism about the Vikings in terms of winning all the close games, maybe skepticism about Kirk Cousins, probably baked into that a little bit. Like you say, it could be trying to tease out money one way or the other. People saying, I'm going to bet the Vikings to cover that as home underdogs, or trying to get the line to shift a little bit. I think there's a little bit of that in those opening lines that gets baked into it too. But Vegas is generally pretty good at what it does, and I think the number you would also look at is point margin for the year. Dallas has outscored opponents by more than the Vikings have. Yes. So if you are looking for quantifiable reasons for that spread, or for that line, I should say, that may be part of it. And I say this with no great level of insight on gambling. It's not really an area that I've spent a ton of time acquiring expertise about, but I would think that may be part of what we're seeing there.
Not legal in Minnesota, at least not yet. So just it's an interesting piece of it, though, as you think about it. And I did not see that bit about 1976 being the last time this happened. That's definitely a long time ago. You talked about Justin Jefferson a little bit ago too. A couple interesting things there. I mean, one, people starting to mention him in the MVP discussion. MVP, that's not usually a wide receiver's domain, but you can make the argument that he should be in the conversation at this point based on the impact he's having.
Yeah, it's funny because he got asked today about the 2,000-yard possibility, which would be an NFL record for a receiver, and the MVP chatter has come up a little bit this week. And I nudged Dave Campbell from the Associated Press and said, "Are we living back in 2012?" I mean, those conversations were happening in the locker room with a running back that year in Adrian Peterson, where he was trying to break Eric Dickerson's record, obviously, and ended up running for 2,097 yards and won the NFL MVP. He is still the last non-quarterback to win it. That was 10 years ago. A wide receiver has never won it.
Right.
Mark Craig wrote earlier this week about there have only been 5 ballots cast for a wide receiver to even have a vote for the thing in the last, I think, 24 years. Randy Moss had 4 of them, and I think Cooper Kupp had one probably last year. So will he get a vote? He could. Will he win it? I doubt it. It's probably a little more of an open race among the quarterbacks than it typically has been. I don't think he'll win it. But the fact that you can have that conversation, I think, reflects how good he's been. And it is, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because I think if you were going to make a case right now based on the fact they're 8-1, they would not be 8-1 without him doing what he's done. And you look at they're tied for the best record in the league. You'd certainly have to at least consider the possibility. I don't know if the voters will go that way, but I think there's at least an argument to be made to stop and think about it and consider him as a serious candidate, at least where we sit right now.
Well, and usually when it happens that a receiver has probably an MVP worthy year, it's because his quarterback has also had an MVP worthy year. And I don't think we would say that about Kirk Cousins at this point. As good as he's been in key situations, as many big time throws as he's made, including at Buffalo. I mean, he's thrown 8 interceptions this season. You can find a lot of guys who are better than him in passer rating, passing yards, touchdowns, total QBR, whatever you want to do. He's probably not in that discussion. So it's an interesting dynamic maybe between, usually a wide receiver, probably isn't in that discussion anyway because there's other quarterbacks out there, but usually one of those quarterbacks is on his team. I mean, that might not be the case with Jefferson.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think you would not look at Cousins. And I think Cousins has played awfully well. The eye test of what he has done has, I think, been some of the best he's ever played the position. The numbers are not that. And the numbers are statistically worse than anything he's done in Minnesota. He also has not played as much garbage time as he has in the past. That's always the thing he gets knocked for.
There's been like no garbage time this year. Maybe the
No.
second half of the Eagles game.
Yeah, that's about it. And he was trying to get him back in it at that point. That's when he threw a couple of interceptions.
That's right, he did. Yeah.
There has not been a lot of that, and that's always the thing he's been knocked for is, his numbers are pretty, but a lot of it's in garbage time when they're trying to catch up. Defenses are playing him softer. There's not been that this year.
No.
So, but completion percentage, interceptions, all that stuff is not good enough to probably put him in the conversation among voters that maybe don't watch him every day and are looking at raw numbers. I don't think he would be among the serious contenders. So, yeah, it does change that thing a little bit where if it's been Jerry Rice getting the votes in 1987, Joe Montana is there to have something to say about that as well, or Steve Young, or, kind of depending on how it went back in the 80s, probably Montana more in 87. I think Young was more 88 that he ended up playing more often. That's a fair point as well. It's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out, because if this keeps up at this current rate, there will certainly be some momentum in the national conversation for Jefferson to be considered as a candidate, I think.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake. With 24/7 gaming, the good times never have to end. And you can satisfy your cravings at our restaurants and bars. Or relax in one of our luxurious hotel rooms. Those that play together, stay together. And don't forget to join Club M so you can spark new memories and bask in the rewards along the way. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
Another thing on that point, you tweeted Thursday that Jefferson had heard from Odell Beckham Jr. after his amazing catch on Sunday, which only leads to speculation that OBJ is going to sign here anytime soon, right?
No, that's not what's happening.
Okay,
at least
I didn't think so.
Was the conversation.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
No, it was just a, hey, congratulations on the catch, because that was the obvious comparison. Is the famous catch Beckham made, I think, on Sunday Night Football back in, I want to say 2014, 2015, something like that. The famous one-hander where he's reaching behind him and halted him for a touchdown. Jefferson's had that look, and those two are friendly. I mean, they know each other from LSU circles and have been in touch over the years as part of that fraternity. I don't think the conversation was about, hey, come sign here. I'm sure that if he wanted to come here, the Vikings would entertain it. Obviously, Kevin O'Connell, Wes Phillips, some of the other coaches on that coaching staff know him from having him with the Rams last year, and knows Jefferson as well. No, this I think was mostly a congratulatory, hey, saw your catch. That was pretty sweet. Congrats, kind of thing.
Wish we could have started some rumors here, but I guess we won't.
That Vikings Twitter kind of, when I tweeted about him hearing from Beckham, they kind of, a lot of the mentions were about that possibility. So,
couple of final thoughts leading into Dallas before I let you go. Injuries, creeping up a little bit on this team. Still, it doesn't seem like Dalvin Tomlinson is necessarily kind of hit or miss there. Obviously, no Cameron Dantzler. You had Evans and Darisaw go out with concussions. I know in Darisaw that was mitigated a little bit. Blake Brandel played very well, at least according to the eye test and the PFF grades, but that's your starting left tackle. You don't want to be messing around there. So as you think about injuries playing a role here against Dallas, what do you think?
Yeah, Darisaw is the big one. I mean, this is a really good pass rush that the Cowboys are going to throw at them with Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, and they've got Dante Fowler, who's a former first-round pick. Anthony Barr is in that mix.
Right.
Is blitzing linebacker.
Old friend.
They have a lot of guys. There are a few others in that mix. I think Sam Williams as well. I mean, they have a lot of people they will throw at you, and it'll be a lot of five-man fronts in certain situations. And they'll have a number of guys that they can keep fresh and just bring pressure from a number of different people. So that is going to be a big challenge if you don't have Christian Darisaw, who has been among the best left tackles in the league this year. I mean, yes. Blake Brandel, I thought, played really well towards the end of the game on Sunday, but that Bills pass rush is one that is stronger up the middle than, they don't have the ends that just kind of terrify you in the way that the Cowboys might. They have Von Miller, but they're not going to have those guys on each side like the Cowboys probably will. So that is the big question. for this week. I think, do they get Darrisaw out of the concussion protocol, and is he ready to go? Because if they have him, he's been awfully good, and they'd certainly like to have him for this one. There's no question about it. That's, to me, the big question for this one. Just, do they have him, and is Blake Brandel up for a full game of kind of holding up, protecting Kirk Cousins' blindside if not?
Well, and Evans, too. I mean, if they don't have him, they don't have Dantzler. I mean, it gets thin. This is what we've talked about all year, where it does get thin depth-wise just because of the way they're constructed, the way they have been constructed the last few years. And it's going to get tested. It just naturally has to as the year goes on.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, you look at, is it Andrew Booth? Is it Duke Shelley coming in, who made a
really good play
on Sunday? But are you counting on those guys for 65 snaps? That's a little bit of a different story. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to keep an eye on in the last couple of injury reports of the week as they go into Sunday. I think it's certainly a winnable game, but you'd feel better about it if you kind of have the health advantage that they've had for a lot of the year, because most weeks they have been the healthier team. And I think that, they're not in a bad spot, but, this is the part of the season where you're going to see some things happen, and they're working through a few of those things right now.
Well, we'll see how it all plays out on Sunday. Ben, appreciate the time as always. We'll catch up again soon.
Sounds good, Mike. Thanks.
One thing I will say about the Vikings' depth so far this year is I've been pretty impressed. I was skeptical coming in as to how they could overcome any kind of, medium-term injuries, but they've won without Dalvin Tomlinson. They won without Cameron Dantzler. They won without Cameron Dantzler's replacement, him going out of that game, Caleb Evans. They won when Christian Darrisaw went out and Blake Brandel had to come in. They've overcome not a lot of injuries, but some significant ones at stretches already this year. So maybe the depth is better than it has been, or better than we thought it was going to be, and they do have some quality pieces, even if we haven't seen them play yet. So we're going to see that play out on Sunday even a little bit more, but some encouraging things with what we've seen so far in that regard. Let's talk soccer for a while today on Daily Delivery, something my good friend Jon Marthaler accuses me of not talking about enough on this show. So John is going to put his money where his mouth is. I don't think that's the right expression. I also don't think the king has no pants is the right expression.
No, that's the correct expression.
That is the correct expression. Okay. John is here to get us ready for the World Cup. World Cup starts this weekend. U.S. plays its first match 1 p.m. Monday against Wales, against England next Friday, and then the group finishes up a week from Tuesday against Iran. An interesting slate. But the biggest story is that they are back in the World Cup after not being there in 2018. But a team, John, that just looking at it, and we'll get into the World Cup as a whole, but I'm interested in the U.S. squad, and I think a lot of our listeners are too, in terms of where this team is going into the World Cup, strengths, weaknesses. I mean, there's always grumbling, there's always elation throughout an entire World Cup cycle. But as you think about this team right now as they go into Qatar, what stands out the most to you?
The thing that stands out with this squad more than anything, I think, is their youth and just how young the team is. Not only are most of the guys 23, 24, but they got the same number of guys who can't legally buy a beer in the United States that are under 21 as they do guys who are 30 and over. And, usually you're going to see a squad with a lot of guys who are 30 and over, but part of the reason they failed to qualify in 2018 is they just did not have a good generation of guys. And they really have moved on from that group as much as they possibly could and gone to this new sort of young, exciting, up and coming, traditionally Europe-based kind of squad. And it's different than the U.S. teams of old. The U.S. teams of old used to be a lot of guys who maybe were veterans, maybe American-based, and maybe were a little shorter on talent than the teams they were playing against, but you knew they were going to work hard and they were going to run hard and they were just going to try to do the old Brian McBride and just try to sort of tackle the ball into the goal. Just it'll hit you,
right.
Hit you in the shoulder, hit you in the chest, off your knee, something like that. Just something like that is going to happen. Now they've got a lot of guys who are more exciting, more skilled, but also much, much younger. So this is the first big test for a lot of these guys.
Who is the striker and who is the center back?
Like they know that. There's still 3 days until the World Cup starts.
Seems to be the big question and maybe a problem in terms of the person aside from the keeper who is most directly responsible for keeping the ball out of the goal and putting the ball in the goal. They don't have answers at those two positions, which would be great. It seems like a team that a Minnesota fan should get behind because they have a lot of big questions at obvious positions, but otherwise seem like they might have some things going for them.
Yeah, up front there, I suppose the guy who's most likely to start against Wales is Jesus Ferreira. He started a bunch of the qualifying guys. He's one of their exceptionally young guys. He's just 21. He plays for FC Dallas. But they've got their other options are sort of Josh Sargent, who plays in the English second division. He was once the great hope at the number 9 position for the United States and went over to Germany and had an absolutely terrible time there. Now he's moved on. He's gone to Norwich, and they're down in the second division, but at least he's playing and at least he's scoring. So they've got those two. They've got, you wonder if there's been a lot of rumors that Tim Weah, who played wing for most of the qualifying, there's been a lot of rumors that maybe they'll be looking to start him up front. It's a little hard to see what their best option is. Probably to start with, it's Ferreira, but it could be any of a number of guys because they just have not found that guy who's going to be reliable up at the number 9 position. So they're hopeful. They've got the third striker on the roster is Haji Wright. He has not played a lot for the USA, and I think he's less of a possible solution and more of a, if everything else goes wrong, here's the third guy we brought. I wish they would have brought Brandon Vasquez, who plays for FC Cincinnati. Over the past year, I've really been convinced by the people who thought he was the best solution, but he wasn't part of the setup all through qualifying. And they apparently decided not to try him just for the World Cup, but I was hopeful. It's not happening. And so I plan to be one of those incredibly annoying people that every time they don't score a goal in some way, shape, or form, I'm like, well, Brandon Vasquez would have scored that.
We love to second guess, but it does seem like, the World Cup's probably not the time to be doing a whole lot of experimenting. Those are hopefully the kinds of things you work out over the months and years of preparation. But it's intriguing. They have a lot of possibilities. Like you said, a lot of young players on the roster. So they're kind of in this space where it feels like there's anticipation for what they might accomplish in this cycle, just because the group feels like they at least have a decent chance of getting through, as good as England presumes to be. You could see the U.S. being, easily in that second qualifying spot, getting through that group. And, frankly, if they get through this group, not looking too far ahead, the group they would face in the round of 16, nobody coming out of that necessarily scares you that much. So there's this anticipation for a possibility for a good showing, but it also feels like okay, whatever happens this year is kind of a build up to 2026, which again, you're looking 4 years into the future, but it does have some import in terms of what you're going to see right now.
Right. And it certainly feels like, just looking at the age of the squad, you look and say, well, this team has got to be better in 2026 than they are now. So it feels in some ways like it's been a 7-year buildup to 2026 that started when they appointed Greg Berhalter as the coach. But at the same time, if they have a terrible tournament like they did in 1998 or something like that, then where do you go from there? If there needs to be a reckoning, are they going to start over, or what are you going to do if these young guys are damaged beyond repair, so to speak, where it's like, well, they just can't do it. Then what do they do now?
I don't think we're going to know that after 3 games in the World Cup, though, are we? I mean, I don't think that would be.
But that's the way these things go. It's not like we can look around and say, well, the Nations League final last year, it was fun. Don't get me wrong. Right. It was fun, but beating Mexico is not the high bar to climb over right now that it once was.
So who are the 3 most important players for the U.S. before we get to some other teams in this that are participating in this tournament?
Well, it's a little bit of a hard question to answer because there's the 3 guys who are maybe most exciting and the 3 guys who are maybe the highest profile, and that would be your guys like Christian Pulisic and Giovanni Reina and stuff like that. But the guys who might be the most important are guys like Matt Turner, who's I would say got to be the starter for the World Cup. He's in goal. He played several of the qualifiers, but not all the qualifiers. I think he either did or didn't. It was never said conclusively whether he got frostbite when he played in St. Paul for the qualifier against Honduras, but he was in net for that one. But Zach Steffen, who played a lot of them, isn't even on the squad. He has had a rotten a couple of years and has just dropped out of the reckoning right now. So if Matt Turner plays well or doesn't play well, that might affect their chances more than anything. Another guy who's sort of in that boat, I think, is Tyler Adams, their defensive midfielder, just because if he isn't playing well, they don't have a guy that they can just swap in and be like, all right, so Adams isn't going well. We're gonna slam in Luca De La Torre or something like that. It just doesn't. They don't do the same things, and they don't do the same things in the United States system. And the third guy, I think, that probably is a guy to watch and is a guy of how a bellwether for the team a little bit is probably Tim Ream, the center back.
Yeah.
You mentioned their center back problems. They really wanted to have Walker Zimmerman and Miles Robinson as their center back pairing going into this World Cup, and then Miles Robinson ripped his Achilles, I think it was.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
And is not part of the squad, and so they've been sort of searching around for who is going to be that center back partner, and they've gone with Tim Ream, who he plays in the Premier League for Fulham, and that's been true for. He's the oldest guy on the squad, I think. It seems like they've been trying Tim Ream and then trying somebody else in place of Tim Ream for about 3 decades now, where I don't know if Tim Ream gives his team what you want, so they would try somebody else. John Brooks came out. Tim Ream he's been around forever, and now coming into the World Cup, all of a sudden they gotta go back to that particular well. So if he doesn't play well, it could be a long World Cup, because the guys that they're going to put in behind Ream at center back, you're not any more excited about any of those guys than you are. Or if God forbid Walker Zimmerman gets hurt, then who knows what they're going to do.
A long World Cup being a short World Cup, I would imagine. Final thought on the World Cup, then I want to ask you one MLS thing before we go.
Sure.
Just big picture, who are we considering the favorites this year? Who do you like to win it all, since you are generally good at picking these things?
I think we should talk about it. The 2014 and 2018.
Yes.
The Star Tribune had me make picks, and I was right both times.
You were right both times, which is hard to do. That is not easy to do. That's right.
Take that, people. I took some obvious favorites, but I stuck with them. Stuck with them. And the 3 obvious favorites this time around are Brazil and Argentina and France. Are, I would say, I don't know what the betting odds look like, but they got to be far and away the 3 favorites. It's a little hard to pick one of those. I think it would be fascinating to take, let's say, Italy, which didn't qualify again from the World Cup, take their national team and put them in a tournament with Brazil's second team made up of 26 guys that didn't make this roster. Same for Argentina and France. I would absolutely watch that, because that would be a great tournament. You could put all 3 of those second teams, I think, would be favored to win their groups and maybe make the quarterfinals at this World Cup. That's how stacked those 3
Can
rosters.
they loan the U.S. a striker? Can we do some dual citizenship at this stage?
We've got a fair amount. If you look down the U.S. roster, there are a fair number of guys where they don't have the traditional American soccer background. Let's put it that way. So maybe we could do that. Maybe we could get a little aggressive nationalization program for those 3 countries. It's not too late. It's not too late for us to do that.
Okay, so which one of those 3 is going to win it all?
I think Brazil is going to win it all. I think Brazil they're coming off 20 years where they won the World Cup so often, and it seemed like for about the last couple of decades, they just sort of said, you know what? We don't need to have a structure or try to play as a team or really do anything but just run around and play awesome to watch soccer. Very entertaining, but it hasn't been successful now that international teams are a little more organized than they used to be. But they finally seem to have a little bit of organization together. They got the team set up well enough to accentuate Neymar's strengths, and I think when the team is set up to help him, he's probably still the best player in the world. So I romantically, I wish Messi would finally get the World Cup title. He's been fated to chase for the entirety of his career. But so my hope is that romantically, my heart would hope that Argentina would beat Brazil in the semifinals and go on to beat France, but I think it's going to be Brazil. That's my pick.
There you go. Well, appreciate all of that. One quick MLS item. We saw it was a few months ago that we learned that all of Major League Soccer games are going to be on Apple TV next season. We learned pricing this week. You brought that to my attention. I believe that is free for MLS season ticket holders. $79.99 if you are already an Apple TV subscriber. $99.99 if you are not a subscriber but just want the soccer package. Sounds like a pretty good deal for access to every single game. But as you and I were talking about before we started recording, if you're just a fan of one team, is that still a good deal, especially if you're used to getting everything as part of your local package anyway? I don't know. I'll be interested to see how that plays out. What do you think of that as you saw it?
Well, I think it's interesting, and it'll be interesting to see just how many people get this particular package. I think you look at just the local scene. If the NBA or MLB sold a package like that, I think you'd see a lot of people that say, "Oh, I can get the Twins and the rest of MLB," or "Oh, I can get the Timberwolves and the rest of the NBA," or God forbid the football ever goes off broadcast television and you have to do the same thing for the Vikings, but then everybody in the state would buy NFL Plus or whatever you call it. So I think it'll be interesting to see from a soccer perspective how many people, and especially people, you are the clearinghouse, the local clearinghouse for people complaining
casuals
about Valley Sports North, and
yes,
people who are cord cutters and are complaining about cable. This is an opportunity for people like that who have been looking for something that's going to include the local teams and national teams, but maybe have not traditionally been huge soccer fans. We'll see how many of those people and how many people like that, maybe you, who are soccer fans but not soccer sickos, like people like me, are going
sickos.
are going to subscribe to this. It's interesting to see. It's interesting to see that MLS is sort of taking that step as the first league that's going to sort of put itself in the silo. And I say that, but there's going to be free games. They're still working on deals with ESPN and Univision and Fox and all these other places that have broadcast games before. So I would be surprised if I would be very surprised if the only place you could watch MLS next season was on Apple TV.
I just really look forward to the day where you can watch sports on 42 different streaming platforms that you all have to pay for.
Yeah. I'd like to pay. The thing that I like about the cord cutting is how instead of playing one place $150, I pay 400 different places $5 every month. It's nice. I like it a lot.
Really works out. The math does work out in your favor when you do it that often. We'll see if the math works out in the U.S. favor as well. Like we said, they play Monday. I don't think Royce and I will be talking about that game a whole lot as we set it up on Monday, so I'm glad that Jon Marthaler was able to join me on today's show. I'm interested. This is going to be an interesting World Cup, and at least they are participating this year no matter how it turns out, right?
Well, I mean, as poorly as some of the World Cups went in the years before it, 2018 was the worst because it's like your team playing in the Super Bowl 3 times in 8 days or whatever, except you miss out on that. And 2018 World Cup was pretty depressing without the U.S. there. So I'm excited. Been waiting for this for a long time.
Didn't even get their orange slices that year. It's just terrible. All right, John. Appreciate it.
How dare you?
Thanks, John. I just had to nudge John with the orange slices, didn't I? Jeez, why did I do that? I'm such a mean guy. John loves soccer so much. I like soccer too, and I'm excited for this World Cup. These guys don't get orange slices. I'm sure they get something much different after a match. That is just some soccer revisionist history is all that is. Speaking of which, the show is history for the week. Appreciate you listening along with me all week. Should be back at it Monday with Royce talking about the Vikings game, Gophers against Iowa on Saturday. Lots of good stuff this weekend. Appreciate you listening all week. Back at it again on Monday.